Tobacco remains the leading preventable cause of death in the United States. Certain populations that are intentionally targeted by the tobacco and vape industry experience more significant impacts of tobacco use. On top of the inequitable burden of death and disease on communities, the industry causes irreversible harm to the environment, manipulates government, and skirts laws designed to reduce its impact, making tobacco not only an issue of health, but one of social justice. Social justice issues are those rooted in inequity and denial of human rights. Conversely, a just society is one in which everyone, regardless of circumstance, has equitable access to health, opportunity, and the privileges that society offers. In order to create more just and equitable systems, we need to uncover the root causes and then challenge and change systems and policies that are oppressive and inequitable. Because our systems and laws were created by people who have traditionally held power, they place a higher value on certain groups over others. As a result, individuals with certain identities accumulate opportunity, while others accumulate disadvantage. This is similarly true with tobacco use. Research shows that African Americans, the LGBTQ+ community, and individuals of low socioeconomic status unjustly suffer the negative health consequences related to tobacco use. And sadly, it's also true for young people. Youth who feel unsafe at school, experience economic instability, don't have an adult they feel comfortable talking with, or experience discrimination for their gender, race, or sexuality, use nicotine at higher rates than their peers without these experiences. This is, in part, because systems were set up to fail certain groups of people and further marginalize youth. This video will shed light on how tobacco use and prevention can be viewed through a social justice lens, and how youth must be engaged in the fight for justice and a more equitable world. Information is provided for adults who work with youth and want to learn ways to engage young people in the fight for social justice, specifically around tobacco control. We'll take a look at a youth movement in Colorado called UpRISE to see how the program successfully engaged young people to take a social justice approach to tobacco control. We'll focus on ways to engage Generation Z, or those born in the late 1990s and early 2000s. Members of this generation have used digital technology from a young age and are comfortable with the internet and social media. Gen Z is the most racially and ethnically diverse generation in history, with 48% self-identifying as non-white. This generation wants to be involved in co-creating a more just society. More than half of Gen Z believes that people of color are treated unfairly. They care about mental health, gun control, hunger and homelessness, and the environment. By understanding the issues this generation of young people care about, adults can start conversations about where tobacco-related issues intersect. For example, inequity and the environment. Taking a social justice approach to tobacco control allows co-creation of the narrative with youth, relating their personal experiences of abuses of power in their lives to the ongoing overt and covert abuses of power perpetuated by the tobacco industry. When tobacco and nicotine use are positioned within a larger systemic framework, youth can connect the ways that inequities and abuses of power are related to tobacco. For example, a lack of adequate funding for mental health services leaves those impacted without needed supports. Mental health issues are further exacerbated by the intentional, overt, and covert targeting of people with mental health challenges by the tobacco industry. This is the type of knowledge that helps young people to make connections between societal inequities and inspires them to act. Many adults who work with youth may be familiar with positive youth development. Social justice youth development, or SJYD, is a complementary and justice-oriented framework for working with youth. Its goal is to build a more equitable society by engaging critically conscious citizens. SJYD supports a social justice approach to tobacco control where youth culture is honored, and we authentically partner with youth in order to contest, challenge, and respond to the misuse of power in their lives. Power is the ability to influence what others believe, how they behave, or what they value. Some governments and businesses use power to control people and direct their behavior through the use of rewards or punishments. In tobacco control work, we highlight ways that the tobacco industry has abused its power, resulting in negative impacts to people and the environment. We work to create collective power in communities and advocate for policies to improve lives. In 2018, the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment funded a program where youth and adults co-created a strategy to take a social justice approach to tobacco control. The result was a movement called UpRISE. Social justice is rooted in UpRISE in three ways. First, youth and adults learn and talk about their individual identities related to power, privilege, or oppression. Second, youth explore facts about the tobacco industry and ways it abuses power to harm communities and the environment. Third, youth take a social justice approach to tobacco by identifying and addressing the root causes of youth tobacco use in their communities. UpRISE funds 20 youth-serving organizations and/or schools to host youth coalitions. They are located across Colorado and support youth with one or more of the identities targeted by the tobacco industry. All coalitions engage in investigating the root causes of youth tobacco use and organizing for policy change to address them. They found that the reason young people used nicotine included discrimination because of race or gender, lack of appropriate and youth-centered mental health supports, lack of supportive relationships with adults, and lack of belonging in their communities. In addition to this work, UpRISE youth and adult leaders plan an informative and action-oriented statewide activity each year that is implemented by all coalitions in order to elevate a unified tobacco control message in local communities. UpRISE's first statewide activity, called Web of Influence, was designed to show connections between the tobacco and vape industry, its products, and global impacts. The interactive statewide campaign reached over 1,000 youth and adults across Colorado and shed light on marketing that targets youth, debt bondage and forced labor, exploitation of low-income populations, environmental impacts, and targeting of marginalized groups. UpRISE coalitions staged the webs in their communities and invited both youth and adults to leverage their own webs of influence to inform others about the tobacco industry's abuses of power. Here are some of the key messages that were shared as part of this outreach campaign to help others understand the influence of the tobacco industry in everyday life. Marketing that targets youth. Juul is a brand of electronic cigarettes. Executives at Juul Labs claimed they had never marketed to youth and never will. But a congressional hearing on vaping in America and e-cigarette manufacturers' impact on public health found Juul Labs targeted youth as young as age 8 through its educational and community programs. States and individuals are suing the manufacturer for making a highly addictive product and targeting youth using social media and other tactics. Debt bondage and forced labor. In Malawi, a country in Africa, tobacco farm workers work and live on the land they farm and are required to take a loan from the tobacco-owning landowner for food, water, seed, and fertilizer. The tobacco industry then buys the tobacco from the farm workers but sets the price so low that workers can't ever pay back their debts, a system of debt bondage that is a misuse of power and unjust. Exploitation of low-income populations. Nearly 3 out of 4, or 72% of smokers have lower incomes. The tobacco industry intentionally uses its marketing power to target this population because they are more likely to become addicted. There are an estimated 375,000 tobacco retailers in the US, about 27 times more than McDonald's and 28 times more than Starbucks, and they are disproportionately located in low-income communities. Low-income neighborhoods are also more likely to have tobacco retailers located near youth-oriented facilities. Environmental impacts. The tobacco industry contributes to climate change in substantial ways, from heavy pesticide use during crop cultivation to greenhouse gas emissions during production. Tobacco products further contribute to environmental degradation because tobacco waste does not decompose. Discarded vaping liquid, pods, and cartridges are considered acute hazardous waste. Improperly disposed of vaping liquid may present a significant risk to human health and the environment. Other nicotine-containing wastes, including electronic cigarettes, nicotine gum, and nicotine patches, also present health and safety risks. Lastly, deforestation, cigarette butt litter, and lithium-ion batteries thrown into landfills all contribute to pollution that can ultimately affect health and well-being. Targeting marginalized groups. Decades of research affirms patterns of strategic marketing of tobacco products to African Americans and people who are lesbian, gay, bisexual, or transgender through in-store and exterior marketing, intentional product placement, price discounts, event promotions, and advertising for mentholated products, cheap cigars, and cigarillos. Nationwide, census tracts with a greater proportion of African Americans have more tobacco retailers. Studies reveal that there are up to 10 times more advertisements for tobacco in gas stations located in mostly African American communities compared to those in mostly white neighborhoods. The tobacco industry has targeted the LGBTQ+ community since at least 1991, when tobacco company Philip Morris settled a boycott by pledging large donations to AIDS research and other LGBTQ+ programs. Engaging youth and adults in a social justice approach to tobacco control creates a new cadre of diverse leaders who believe tobacco is more than a health issue. It is a social justice issue, and who understand and act to create lasting changes that address the root causes of youth nicotine use.
We have a voice, and we will use it to be part of decision-making and action around issues that impact young people.
UpRISE is primarily an anti-tobacco group, but it functions as so much more than that. In our meetings, we discuss racial equity and justice issues, LGBTQ rights, feminism, and so many other topics connected to anti-tobacco work, because students want to talk about those issues. In our communities, there is a crucial need for safe, positive, inclusive spaces for young people to express themselves and learn about the world around them. UpRISE fulfills that need.
In the first year of the movement, an UpRISE survey found that youth participating in UpRISE had an improved ability to use their voices in decision-making and saw increases in positive adult relationships, anti-tobacco industry attitudes and beliefs, and psychological empowerment. Adults in the movement reported engagement in critical reflection and taking action on how power is managed in youth programs. They also reported an increased understanding of ways the tobacco industry has abused its power and how to intentionally engage in positive relationships with youth and provide opportunities for youth to have a voice in decision-making. Social justice work calls on adults to understand their own identities and how those relate to power, privilege, or experiences of cumulative disadvantage. Here are some ideas for ways adults can increase their knowledge and skills to engage with youth in social justice efforts. Read books, listen to podcasts, or take classes around inequities and power imbalances such as racism, sexism, and adultism. Reflect on personal belief systems and how these may have contributed to an unequal distribution of power and ways to change power imbalances and work with youth. Find ways to leverage position and power to amplify youth voices in communities and work in solidarity with young people on issues they care about. Social justice work is a lifelong commitment. Its goal is the eradication of oppression and creating equity for all. By exposing the tobacco industry's intentional abuses of power and co-creating solutions with youth to address root causes of tobacco use, we can ignite a contagious passion for confronting the tobacco industry and promoting policies that advance true equity.